Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Now, live from Chicago, the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
Hal Sparks, your comedian and multimedia personality.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hal Sparks.
All right, let's do this.
You know, Johnny Million, welcome to the show this morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
How was your week, my friend? That good, huh?
No, not good. Right out of the gate.
I had a similar level of goodness, I will say. Last night, Summer and I, this is on a personal note before we get into the worldwide craziness that is happening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thumbs up. Join us today, blah, blah, blah. Twitch.tv/HalSparks. Anyways, last night, Summer and I went and saw the Mildred Spitzer Orchestra, also a.k.a. Jeff Goldblum's jazz band.
Oh, neato.
Which performed here in Las Vegas at the Virgin / Mohegan Sun cacophony of anti-branding mess that is that building right now. Because when you think Virgin Airlines and Virgin stuff, you think like neon lighting, like kind of buried in the, like blue airplanes on the inside, coolly lit and stuff. And this just looks like a Mohegan Sun halfway through it. And then
so he's a pianist, yeah?
Yes, he is. I've heard that about him. And he, in between, if you ever get a chance, ladies and gentlemen, I highly recommend it. Not that any of you need any encouragement to go, quite frankly. And he plays these relatively small venues because it is a jazz band after all. And he does they do 10 songs. And in between, he does either trivia or a little guess the Jeff Goldblum quote. Is this a line that Jeff Goldblum said, or is this from another movie? And his manager hands him the list of whatever it is before, in between songs. So he's never seen it before. So you get to see, which is really
for him too.
Yes, which is really what life is about in terms of his performance, is watching Jeff Goldblum react to new stimuli. Right? Yep. That's all it is. It's just seeing Jeff Goldblum react to stuff. That's his acting. That's everything. And he does have kind of a Jiminy Glick high-low language thing where he's like, I was talking to there's this guy that, I really like it. Yeah. And he goes up and down like that. And a lot of gesturing. And it's a lot of fun. Waiting for him to actually say something. Oh, it's very good. And he discussed, as we were walking in, but what nobody needs to hear this, but it's so fun. As we're walking in, you're in line to go to this show, and instead of there being an opening act on stage or a quiet stage where everyone can get seated, and ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Goldblum and the Mildred Spitzer Orchestra, out walks. We're walking in, and Jeff Goldblum is already on stage chit chatting with people about how I ate at does anybody know what restaurant I ate at? Anybody? Nope. And people would yell at the restaurant. He was like, no, I went to the Italian place. You know what I had? You know what I had? I had the steak salad. Yeah, it was good. So good, a steak salad. And just ramble. I mean, honestly, just telling you about his day. Just Jeff Goldblum. And then eventually he's like, Adam's 7:30. We're late. The band is coming out here in just a moment. And then the band comes out and he does some songs, and in between he does the stuff. And they had a guest singer for 3 songs. And then he was like, oh, we have another show. We have to go. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. And that was it. It was fantastic and a joy and weird. And I cannot wait until Nick Cage learns to play the banjo, because there is no way anybody can top this at this point. That's the only way it could happen, is if Gary Busey takes his Buddy Holly act on the road again, which he used to do, and now would be fantastic to see.
That would be amazing.
Oh yeah, and then Nick Cage, traveling around doing his show it would be. I mean, it's the only way to even describe.
How, in the name of Zeus's butthole, did you get out of your cell?
So to see him scream, like, have to go, is that a line from a movie, or did I? What am I doing? Anyways, it was just yes, we get it. So lovely time had by all, had to share in the middle
It's
of all
lovely.
this weirdness, because again, we are on, everybody's vastly we on the verge of World War III. That's the big one. And the quick answer is, ladies and gentlemen, is take a deep breath. No, we are not. Cooler heads are prevailing. People are paying attention to these things, and decisions are being made based on the actual possibility of that, and therefore not doing things to ratchet that stuff up, right?
Right.
And so I have been saying over the last little bit, when people have been calling for a no-fly zone, even to some degree, Zelensky asking for one in a couple of areas, recognizing that action of creating a no-fly zone, specifically our planes or NATO planes flying through the air, policing the skies so that if a Russian flies into the airspace of Ukraine, it is fired upon, is a next level act of aggression and war between them. It also undermines the sort of the sovereignty of the Ukrainian fight in its own way, and it adds to the argument that Russia will use that NATO, it's really not Ukraine that kicked their butt, it's NATO ganged up on them. That they use this as a proxy just to drag them out and beat them, and this is how they will excuse their action in many ways, that this is their, that we, the West, are using this as a proxy war, and it's them against the world. It's their MacArthur Park moment. Someone left the cake out in the rain, and they don't have the recipe. They will never have the recipe again. And so when they are faced with their war crimes after the end of this, and when they are faced with the abject disgust of the rest of the civilized world by their actions, they won't have this out where they go, well, we were pushed into this by, NATO expansion, and just to prove it, they created a NATO fly zone. They were basically a NATO country anyways. We were right to be afraid, even though none of the NATO countries, including the ones that expanded into NATO in 1999, have attacked Russia ever. Ever, not ever, okay? So, yesterday, an article was put on American Purpose by a guy named Francis Fukuyama, and I shared this with you, Johnny Million, before we got on the air, which makes some really good points. And some of them are points that people who watch my live stream every day, which of course is 3 o'clock Pacific time in the afternoons, and I do 2 hours, slightly plus, of right-wing talking point burial. And in the course of talking about these things, one of the things that I have brought up is the fact that there is no win in this for Vladimir Putin. There simply is not. There may have been an ability for him, genuinely, at the beginning of this, to seize slightly more territory around Donbass and Crimea by, declaring these regions, pushing in, and then pulling back and gaining basically another salami slice of Ukraine, which was originally the strategy from a long time ago, and the strategy that Trump was supposed to help them create during his presidency, and he failed miserably at doing it. Because remember, the plan essentially was Trump was to undermine and undermine NATO, distance America from our allies, and then when Russia decided to go into Ukraine, there would be a huge division between the United States and NATO, and specifically Germany in this, that would just be stiff-armed everybody, so that the taking over of Ukraine would be a fait accompli by the time everybody got their act together. And then it would just be Trump excusing it and saying it was already part of Russia anyways, and it's not a big deal, and he can have it. And then Trump Tower, Moscow, is built 2 years later, whatever. So, but Trump, because he is a lifelong screw-up and will always be a screw-up and has always screwed up everything, screwed this up, along with Trump crypto, which is very funny, and we will talk about that later.
Wait, Trump crypto?
Oh yeah. Wait, there's the MAGA coin. Oh yeah, good stuff. So
and it looks like our Russia correspondent can call in whenever is good for you.
yes, and so what we'll do is Philip at the half hour. We'll do one more break after this. I'm going to see if he can call in via Skype, but I have to set that up in between, not after this break, but after the next break. We'll see if Philip can call in. If
I'd
that's
like
cool,
to do a
Philip.
meeting with us.
Yes, and group in there. That should work. So fingers crossed that'll be the best way of doing it. If not, he can just phone in to Chicago if that's technologically, Philip, if that's he's watching right now, if that's easier for you. So this and this will give him something to ruminate on. So this is this guy's he's in North Macedonia, which if you're familiar, this guy's where this guy's writing. He's in Skopje in North Macedonia, and that is if you're not familiar, Macedonia is where all the Russian hacker farms are. Curiously enough, they outsource a lot to Macedonia. A lot of money laundering and psyops going on through the Macedonian hacker farms, right? So he's in this thing, and he goes a lot of shenanigans are going on in Macedonia because it's been this sort of satellite of Russia for a long time, as far as they're messing around in other countries and saying, these aren't Russians doing this. These are just patriots living in other countries who are doing this. That's how they get away with it. All right. So he makes these points, and we'll go through them over the course of the show. Actually, we'll take a first break. When we come back, we're going to go through, there's 12 points. And we're going to go through these, and I'm going to tell you which ones I agree with and which ones there's a couple in there that I disagree with, but not in a huge way. It's just a tactical aspect. And we'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Oh my God!
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I get into these talking points, we have a Sanitiversary coming up tomorrow, an anniversary of sanity coming up tomorrow, because Johnny Million, tell the people the good news.
Tomorrow will be 13 years continuous sobriety for me.
A round of applause for...
That's right. Drinking worked until it didn't.
Did it? Is that how it operates?
Nope.
You know that I have never imbibed or taken any drugs, largely because I am plenty weird already.
And you never know how it will counteract with the ivermectin.
That's true. And I've decided that my internal parasites are pets now. I have not named them all because they're in the millions. And I'm afraid that the ivermectin will give them gastrointestinal discomfort. That's
you don't need that.
I don't. No. I don't mind the greasy stool, but I would not do that to my parasites. By the way, on a side note, do you want to know why some people saw a positive response from taking ivermectin when it came to COVID? It's the same reason they would see a positive result from it if they had the flu or some other disease, perhaps, or not. It's because it's an antiparasitic. And a lot of people's immune systems are freaking out all the time because they are overrun with parasites, and which is gross. And so let me just say to all the people who are bragging that I took ivermectin and my COVID didn't put me in the hospital and I felt so much better. That's because you had worms, dum-dum, and you've been carrying around worms forever.
I love it when you say dum-dum.
And your immune system was overreacting all the time because you have parasites, because you are a disgusting non-hand washer.
I was
That's
kidding
why.
about not washing my hand, by the way.
I know you were. That's why. So it's seriously, when you have that kind of parasites, a lot of times your immune system will overreact when something else comes in. And one of the things that caused the most damage in people was the overreaction of the immune system to this new pathogen. Part of it was that, what gave that ground glass lungs problem. And
Cheryl in the chat said, "Yep, if that stuff worked, you had worms."
That's right. And that's what you're telling everybody. Anybody who was like, I took ivermectin and it cured my COVID. Like, no, it didn't, dummy. You just had worms, you disgusting cretin. And your body may have been one of 8% of the 20% of the 6% of the 5% of the 50% of people that had an immune response to the parasites in them that may have affected their body's overreaction that sent them to the hospital. So you're basically just announcing that you're gross and you don't wash your hands after you go to the John. And if anybody goes like, ivermectin for the win, you don't shake hands with that person. They have not learned their lesson. Why do I wash my hands? I just pop a couple ivers and I'm done. It's not my problem. All right. Anyways. That's
dude on Fox who is like, I never wash my hands. I can't see any germs on them.
And yes, correlation and causation. We have them both in one Fox. All right. Anyway, so okay, back to the current parasite, Vladimir Putin, who, in all honesty, does a bit look like a tapeworm if you look at his face. Like if tapeworms had a human face, it would look exactly like Vladimir Putin. If you don't believe me, take a look at a recent picture. He also got a wee bit of mole rat. Anyways, so here they are. These are the 12 points. We won't get to all of them before we get Philip on the line with us. But Russia, number one, Russia is heading for outright defeat in Ukraine. Russian planning was incompetent based on flawed assumptions that the Ukrainians were favorable to Russia and their military would collapse immediately following an invasion. Russian soldiers were evidently carrying dress uniforms for their victory parade in Kyiv rather than extra ammo and rations. That's new information, which I thought was fascinating. Putin, at this point, has committed the bulk of his entire military to this operation. Which, by the way, we had always heard that there was like 500,000 soldiers in reserve, but they're all hanging out over by the border of China and Kazakhstan. They'll come in later. And there are no vast reserves of forces he can call up to add to the battle. Russian troops are stuck outside various Ukrainian cities where they face huge supply problems and constant Ukrainian attacks. True, and true. The fact that they thought this would be easy is reminiscent of the same crap that the Rumsfeld crowd sold to us. Mm-hmm. And we, having been through this, have largely learned our lesson. If you don't believe me, look at the involvement of the U.S. in Syria and the general public's resolve about that, about not getting entrenched in that business. Or look at
let's say we get in there. Let's say we take over. Okay, keep it up.
Yeah. Then what? Right.
Then what?
Same thing. Yeah. The same thing is true about Ukraine, even with Ukraine, as favorable as the American people are to it, the vast majority of people know that we don't want soldiers in their boots on the ground. That's not the point. And if we can support them, we will in military aid and in medical supplies and food and all that kind of stuff, and in the help with refugees. And by the way, creating refugees is part of the Russian plan. Driving people out of Crimea and out of Donbass was the point. The Russians, who are aligned with Russia, who live in Crimea, that are, that everybody in the horseshoe right and left overlap, that Putin's not such a bad guy and Zelensky's a thug, the Cawthorn Russell Brand overlap that exists in the world, those folks
I saw that you did a whole big Russell Brand hunk. What's he on about?
He's the hippie Alex Jones now, but he's he's like, I'm really for peace, but in reality, I mean, you have to watch it. It's long and drawn out, but he's basically, this is what's called horseshoe theory, when the left and the right overlap and you recognize that these aren't people with real political convictions. It's just a version of self-involved, and that always results in the same thing. Right?
Like the guy in Don't Look Up who had a pin that had like the up and down arrow.
Yes, exactly. Right. It's useless to the entire argument. And the idea is like, tear down the whole system so we can start from scratch.
Yeah, he's like, there's more of us than there are of them. It's like, yeah, really, dude, but society's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had chaos and anarchy and violence and all that stuff before. Where do you think we built this thing from? Because most of society is based on enough of that.
Yeah, that didn't
enough
work.
of that
This
too.
Is,
Enough
this
of that.
is all trial and error.
Yeah, enough of that. Enough of that. Enough of that. So there you go. Anyways, the Crimean area, by the way, used to be largely populated with Ukrainians and Turkish people who came across the Black Sea and lived there and lived in relative harmony with the Ukrainians that were there. It's a good mix of people. If you look at like the Turkmenistan, or you look at the East Turkish Turkmenistan independence movement, which is sort of a ISIS-aligned terrorist group that's all mad about the angry at the Chinese about the Uyghur situation, which is a reasonable anger to have. Those folks are born out of that chain of humans that have been there for a long time. Okay, those people were run out by the USSR, and that area of Crimea was largely repopulated with Russians, while allowing some of the Ukrainians to stay there a long time ago. They broomed the thing. Sound familiar? And why, if we're going to speak honestly about the treatment of Native Americans or indigenous people in our part of the world, are we going to suddenly just forget about the fact that the USSR did it and that Russia is currently doing it? There is a huge difference between stuff that was done 200, 300 years ago, or even 50 years ago, that we now go, yeah, no more of that as a society, to people that are like, no, actually, that's kind of my thing. So the second one is the collapse of their position could be sudden and catastrophic. This is again, this take from American Purpose. Rather than happening slowly through a war of attrition, the army in the field will reach a point where it can neither be supplied nor withdrawn, and morale will vaporize. This is at least true in the north. The Russians are doing better in the south. That's because they have ships that can shell areas. But those positions would be hard to maintain if the north collapses, because there is no meeting there. So where are you going? So that is also a unique take that that I have also brought up, but that also a lot of people are like, if they want to hold the country, they're talking in sort of like early Iraq war nonsensical language, or for God's sake, the Afghanistan war concept, which again, Afghanistan, often called the graveyard of empires, is not because that's where empires go to die. That's a misnomer, that's a fallacy, that's silly, and it's helped the Afghan warlords hold that land for a very long time, that storyline, when in reality it's an area of 12 tribes. The reason it's a graveyard is because oftentimes you will make as a graveyard the ground that isn't useful for anything else.
Mm-hmm.
The borders of Afghanistan are one of the few areas on Earth where the countries around it went, we don't want anything past this point. That's amazing. Most borders in the world are, this is mine, up to this point, trying to take as much of it as you can, and but at a certain point you're like, there's no point in going any further. That's Afghanistan. That's this place between these other countries where Pakistan and Iran and Russia and all these other countries have gone, ugh, you can have it for a long time. So we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this, and I hope Philip will be able to join us from Ukraine, perhaps via Skype. We're going to work on it. We'll be back right after this break. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.